I'm a man who plays a lot of video games, and because of that, sometimes I'm not able to do full reviews on every single game I play. But that doesn't mean I don't want to talk about the games, because I think there's a lot of cool games that are flying under the radar for Nintendo Switch owners that you might actually end up enjoying. Today on the channel, I want to talk about some games that I've been playing recently that I think you guys might enjoy playing as well. So sit back, relax, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let's talk about some Nintendo Switch games that you might just like.
Hey, RGT85. Hey, Sean.
Oh my god, it's Stevie Richards! As my buddy Vincent from the Acacia Strain would say, let the ice caps melt, let none survive, because the first game we're going to talk about is a game called Submerged. Now, Submerged originally came out on other platforms a couple years ago, and I remember seeing a review for the game, and I was actually kind of interested in it. It was a game that I thought looked kind of fun, and it looked very atmospheric. Well, I was just browsing the eShop the other night, and it was on sale for $4. It usually retails for about $10, and I went ahead and picked it up. And honestly, I'm glad I did, because I've really been enjoying this game. The story of Submerged is pretty simple. Basically, the world is underwater, and you and your brother are basically going around in the world, and your brother is very ill. So you basically are trying to find things to bring your brother back to health. Either that's items such as food or water or bandages to heal him. And basically the way you do this is you go in your boat and you go and find different tall buildings. And at the top of these tall buildings are these red boxes that contain different items. Now, the way you get around is by your boat, like I said, and you can actually upgrade your boat as well with little things like speed boost. The main bulk of the game, though, is of course ascending these huge buildings and getting to the top of the buildings, and it's pretty straightforward, but sometimes it can get a little bit tricky. I really like the atmosphere of the game, though. It feels very desolate. You feel very alone, and there's little cutscenes that happen that sort of flesh out the story that make you feel kind of worried about what's going on in this world around you. As far as the other elements of the story, everything is told through different little pictures, and really it's not very clear what's happening and what's going on in this world, but I kind of like how it leads you to interpret the story by yourself and really sort of interpret what's happening in this world. As you're going around, there's different collectibles you can find as well, and of course there's different buildings that you come across that are landmarks that you can then get on your map. Another really cool thing that I like about the game is when you're on top of tall buildings, you could basically take out your little telescope and look around, and when you're looking around in your telescope, you could basically find different things that you need to go to or different areas that you need to go to as well, and basically get these more items to heal your brother. So it's a really interesting game. It looks kind of sloppy in handheld mode. There are a few performance issues. The frame rate does hiccup from time to time, but I'm just really enjoying this game. It's very unique in how it gives you a feeling of desolateness and just aloneness in this world, and I think they really nailed that. It's a shame that there are a few performance issues, but if you could look past those, I think it's definitely a game worth checking out. There's a nice little weather cycle that happens in the game as well. A very cool game. Considering it's $10 or less, there's definitely worse games that you can buy at that price point. So Submerged, an interesting game if you're looking for something a bit more relaxing, a bit more ominous. It's definitely a game worth checking out, I feel. Next up, let's talk about a pinball game. Yes, pinball. I'm a man who enjoys pinball. I might not be very good at it, but I think pinball is fun. And recently, Star Wars Pinball released for the Nintendo Switch. Now, on the surface, you would think, okay, it's Star Wars pinball game. You have different tables, and of course, you play on these tables and you do pinball stuff. But really, there's a lot more to this game than just a simplistic pinball game. First and foremost, there are 19 different pinball tables that you have at your disposal in this game. 19! That's a lot of different pinball tables. And there's a lot of cool Star Wars stuff within these pinball tables. It definitely has a very Star Wars feel to it. There's Star Wars music, there's voiceovers that sound like the Star Wars characters. Obviously, they couldn't get things like Mark Hamill to lend his voice to this game, but they do a good job of replicating what these characters sound like, and I really like the presentation in this game. There's a story mode as well, where you basically pick a light side or a dark side, and everything you do will accumulate XP, and the more XP you get, the higher the meter will go, and it's basically a battle of other people online who either pick the light side or the dark side, so it's kind of cool to do. Now, aside from the normal pinball stuff, there's also challenges that you could do in the game as well. There's sorts of tournaments and things like that, and there's even like first player lightsaber battles. I'm not joking, take a look at this. Yes, you are battling with lightsabers against Darth Vader in some of these elements, and it's really cool. There's also a shoot 'em up style level that plays a bit like Galaga. They really put a lot of content into this game, and I think it's a game that's just gonna fly under the radar because people are gonna look at it and be like, oh, it's Star Wars and it's pinball, that's that's great. But the presentation values are just absolutely out of control in this game, and there's so much replay value. Of course, there's online leaderboards as well. I did crack the top 50 for one of the pinball tables. I am pretty proud of that. Shoutouts to me for that. Shoutouts to me. But yeah, if you're looking for a pinball game, it's definitely a great pinball game. But even if you're not looking for a pinball game, if you're just a Star Wars fan, you enjoy all the Star Wars film and all the Star Wars lore, I think you're gonna get a lot of bang for your buck for this game. It retails for $29.99, and I highly suggest you guys check it out. What happens when you take Montezuma's Revenge with Indiana Jones, a sprinkling of Shovel Knight, and a sprinkling of Castlevania? You end up getting Sydney Hunter and the Curse of the Mayans for the Nintendo Switch. Now, you might remember a couple months ago on the channel we talked about Sydney Hunter and the Caverns of Death. Now, this was a game that released on the Super Nintendo and was a pretty straightforward action platformer game that had basically different levels that you would do. But Sydney Hunter and the Curse of the Mayans is the next game in the Sydney Hunter franchise. Now, I actually did some testing on this game for the PC build on it a couple years ago, so I may actually be in the credits of this game. I don't know, I haven't beaten the game on the Nintendo Switch yet, but there is a chance I might be in the credits. Now, in full disclosure, this game was done by my buddy John Lester, aka Gamester81, over at Collector Vision Games, but I was always really interested in this game, and he sent over a review copy of the game, and I'm pretty impressed with what this game offers. We play as a character named Sydney Hunter, and the main goal in this game is to find all of the crystal skulls within the game in order to get out of this cavern that you're in. And basically the way the game works is you can enter a level, and you have to have a certain number of crystal skulls in order to enter the level, and then you can go through and play the level, and then you get back to this main hub world. The hub world is actually cool though, and I like how it works because it sort of gives a Castlevania feel to the game, because some of the crystal skulls and some of the areas and the levels that you play, you won't be able to access until later on in the game when you get things like new abilities or new power-ups or new items. So I like that. It sort of gives it a Metroidvania feel to the game. The game has a really beautiful aesthetic as well. I really like the graphical style of this game. Has sort of a 16-bit graphical style of the game, sort of reminiscent of that Shovel Knight graphical style, but I think it really works well in the game. The music is really done well as well, with some very catchy tunes. Now, I will say the game is pretty challenging. The first few levels are pretty easy, but the game definitely ramps up. There's things like pitfalls, there's platforms that disappear, all sorts of crazy stuff that happens. As you continue to play through the game though, Sydney himself will get more power-ups. You can actually buy things with the gems that you collect in various shops to give Sydney more life, and of course you come across things like different weapons. There's a spear that you can use underwater, there's a boomerang that gives you a more varied attack, and there are boss battles as well. It's really a game that offers a lot of content, and if you're a fan of old school platformers, I think you'll really enjoy this game. Like I said, it has a lot of replay value because in order to get to some of the later levels in the game, you have to have a high number of crystal skulls, and the only way to do that is by replaying levels and going in different areas and using different items that you haven't used before. It's definitely a very fun game if you're looking for a good challenge and you enjoy sort of retro style platformers like Castlevania, Indiana Jones. I think you're gonna have a lot of fun with this game. And the final Nintendo Switch game I want to talk about, it's really not all that great of a game, but it's a game that I absolutely love. And I know a lot of you guys have been wanting for me to talk about this, and that is Deadly Premonition Origins. Now, Deadly Premonition originally came out in the Xbox 360, and it was one of the most polarizing video games of all time. Some people gave the game like a 2 out of 10. Some people gave the game a 10 out of 10. Me personally, I sort of fall in the middle of that. Definitely more towards the better end of the spectrum, but it's definitely a very, very weird game. You play as an FBI agent named Francis York Morgan, who goes to a town called Greenvale because there's been a grisly murder of a woman named Anna there. And it's not just a normal murder, because there's lots of paranormal things that are happening with this as well. There's supposedly a raincoat killer that lives in the town of Greenville, so you have to find this killer and solve the mystery. And it's honestly the weirdest freaking game I've ever played. If you think Suda51 stories are out there, you have seen nothing yet when it comes to Deadly Premonition. This game is just all over the place, but that's what I like about it. You really never know what to expect next. Sometimes you're shooting these demon-like creatures that are coming out of the wall, and it honestly feels kind of like a Dreamcast game, but it's fun. You get different weapons, you get different power-ups for these weapons as well. So it really sort of gives a feeling of sort of nostalgia. And this game originally, like I said, came out on the Xbox 360 and the PS3, so it's not like this is a Dreamcast port, but even at that time, it definitely felt like a Dreamcast game. The overworld segments, there's a lot of open world segments as well, and honestly, they feel kind of like an open world Dreamcast game. Like, the frame rate isn't all that great, the textures are pretty low resolution, but it's still fun to explore this town and learn more secrets about this town. The game also has quite a bit of detective work as well that you do in the later stages of the game, where you meet the characters in the town of Greenvale and you're trying to figure out who this killer is. It's a really polarizing game. I can understand why some people absolutely hate this game. It doesn't really look all that great, it doesn't really play all that great, but if you're a fan of really quirky style survival horror games, this game is second to none. It's a really unique game, and it's a game that I definitely recommend. It's not for everyone. If you don't like old school survival horror games, you didn't like survival horror games on the Dreamcast, you're probably going to be like, what the hell is this? This game is absolutely terrible. But if you have an appreciation for quirky storytelling, you have an appreciation for just very weird worlds, I think Deadly Premonition is a fantastic game. I actually bought the game digitally, and I picked up the collector's edition that is coming out in a couple months through Axis, so I'm a big fan of this game. I'm probably a little bit biased by it, but yeah, it's definitely very unique. You'll never play another game like it, well, except for maybe Deadly Premonition 2. Alright, so those were a couple Nintendo Switch games that I have been playing. Alright, so those were a couple new Nintendo Switch games that I've been playing recently that I think some of you guys might enjoy. So let me know in the comments section down below if you've played any of these games or you plan on picking up any of these games. Are you a Deadly Premonition lover like me, or a Deadly Premonition hater like a lot of people are? And as always guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Be sure to check out other videos on the channel as well, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.